I stared at my phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes, the screen remaining stubbornly blank. No new messages, no calls, just the reflection of my increasingly anxious face in the darkened glass. The restaurant around me hummed with conversation and the gentle clink of expensive silverware against fine china. A waiter glided past, his eyebrow slightly raised as he noticed my still empty place setting across the table. "Would Madam care for another glass of water while waiting?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes betraying a hint of pity. "Yes, please," I managed, my throat dry despite the 2 glasses I'd already consumed. And I'm sure he'll be here any minute." The waiter nodded with practiced politeness, but I caught the subtle exchange of glances between him and the hostess. I was becoming a spectacle. The woman stood up on a blind date at Costello, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. My roommate Eliza had sworn this place was totally worth it, and that her cousin's friend Jason was loaded and gorgeous. Now, 45 minutes later, with no sign of Jason and my bank account containing exactly $27.46 until next payday, I was beginning to panic. The ambient lighting suddenly felt too harsh, exposing my carefully applied makeup and the dress I'd splurged on. A navy blue number that had cost me 2 weeks' worth of lunches. I'd been so excited about this date, my first in over a year since the disaster with Michael. A fresh start, Eliza had said. A chance to meet someone who could take care of me for a change. I shifted in my seat, painfully aware of the glances from nearby diners. The restaurant was arranged in intimate half-moon booths of deep burgundy, each one partially secluded yet visible enough to see and be seen. Costello wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement. A place where the city's elite came to display their wealth and power. And then I saw him. Not Jason. I'd already scrolled through his dating profile pictures enough times to recognize him instantly, but the man in the corner booth diagonally across from mine. I hadn't noticed him before, too consumed with my own embarrassment. But now I couldn't look away. He sat alone. Though his table was set for 4, his presence somehow filling the space that would normally require several people. Dark hair, immaculately styled, framed a face that seemed carved from stone, all angles and shadows in the dimmed lighting. He wore a suit that even I could tell cost more than my monthly rent, the fabric catching the light as he moved his hand to lift a glass of amber liquid to his lips. What caught my attention wasn't just his obvious wealth or his striking features, but the way he seemed separate from the buzz of the restaurant, as if existing in his own gravitational field. As I watched, 2 men approached his table. Deferential in their posture, they spoke in hushed tones, leaning forward while he remained still, only occasionally nodding or murmuring something in response. When they left, they walked backward for the first few steps, like courtiers leaving a monarch. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me so badly I nearly knocked over my water glass. My heart leapt. Finally, Jason with an explanation. But it was just Eliza. Any sign of him yet? I swallowed hard and typed back. Nothing. 45 min late. Pretty sure I've been stood up. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "That jackass! I'm going to kill my cousin. Are you okay? Can you just leave?" My cheeks burned as I glanced at the small leather folder on the edge of my table. The waiter had brought it 20 minutes ago, containing the bill for my single glass of white wine. An impulse order when my nerves had gotten the better of me. $18. Nearly my entire remaining budget until payday. Already ordered a drink. Can't dine and dash, I replied. Shit, Emma. I'm so sorry. I'd transfer you money, but I'm flat broke until tomorrow. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was stranded at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, with no date and barely enough money for the wine, let alone an Uber home. I could feel tears threatening, blurring the chandelier lights into starbursts. Taking a deep breath, I tried to collect myself. I needed to explain to the waiter, maybe offer to wash dishes or... Excuse me. The voice came from beside me, deep and smooth as velvet. I looked up, blinking away the moisture in my eyes, and found myself staring at an expensively tailored jacket, then higher, into the face of the man from the corner booth. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall, with shoulders that blocked the light, creating a shadow that fell across my table. His face was striking rather than conventionally handsome, with a straight nose, high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the restaurant's dim lighting. "I couldn't help but notice your situation," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Your date isn't coming, is he?" Embarrassment flooded me anew. Great. Even the strangers in the restaurant had been watching my humiliation unfold. "It appears not," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure." His lips curved in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A man who keeps a woman like you waiting isn't worth your time." Before I could respond, he gestured subtly, and a waiter materialized beside him. Not the one who had been serving me, but an older man with a silver mustache who seemed to be in charge. "Marco," the dark-eyed stranger said, "the lady will be joining me for dinner. Please have her things moved to my table." Marco bowed slightly. "Of course, Mr. Russo, right away." My brain finally caught up with what was happening. "Wait, Unless," Mr. Russo said, his gaze intense enough that I had to resist the urge to look away, "you'd prefer to continue waiting alone?" I glanced around at the other diners, some of whom were now openly staring. My phone screen lit up with another message from Eliza. "Maybe try to sneak out." "I don't even know you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He extended a hand, large and adorned with a single platinum ring on his right index finger. "Alessandro Russo. And you are?" The situation felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. "Emma," I replied, automatically taking his offered hand. "Emma Chen." His fingers closed around mine, warm and dry. "Well, Emma Chen," he said. And the way he pronounced my name sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "I'm having dinner alone tonight, which is a rare occurrence for me. You've been abandoned. It seems the universe is suggesting we should eat together." There was something in his tone that didn't quite match his words. Less suggestion, more command, despite the civility of his phrasing. I should have politely declined, should have figured out another solution. But something about Alessandro Russo made refusal feel impossible, like trying to swim against a powerful current. "I can't afford this place," I blurted out, honesty winning over pride. That almost smile returned. "I'm inviting you to be my guest. Now come, before your wine gets any warmer." As if on cue, Marco appeared with my glass and the leather folder containing my bill, which Alessandro took and tucked into his jacket without looking at it. A second man had materialized behind him, broad-shouldered and stone-faced, wearing an earpiece despite the late hour and indoor setting. He scanned the restaurant constantly, his gaze never resting in one place for long. I hesitated only a moment longer before gathering my purse and standing. What choice did I really have? As I followed Alessandro through the restaurant, I was acutely aware of the eyes tracking our progress. Curious, envious, speculative. The back of Alessandro's jacket was immaculate, not a wrinkle to be seen, and he moved with the confidence of someone who never questioned his place in the world. His booth was larger than mine had been, positioned in a corner that offered a view of the entire restaurant while remaining partially secluded. As we approached, I noticed a third man rise from a nearby table to join the guard behind us. These weren't friends or business associates, I realized with a jolt. They were security. "Who are you?" I asked, as Alessandro gestured for me to take a seat on the plush burgundy cushion. He slid in across from me, adjusting his cuffs with a practiced motion. "I told you my name. That's not what I meant." Alessandro studied me for a moment, then signaled to Marco without breaking eye contact with me. "Bring the 96 Brunello and a fresh menu for Ms. Chen." Only when Marco hurried away did he lean back slightly. "I'm a businessman with diverse interests. Import, export, real estate, finance." The vagueness of his answer should have been my second warning. The first had been the security detail. But there was something magnetic about him that short-circuited my usual caution. "And do you often rescue stranded women from embarrassing dates?" I asked. "Only when they intrigue me." He leaned forward slightly, and I caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and spice. "Tell me, Emma Chen, what do you do when you're not being stood up by unworthy men?" The directness of his gaze made my skin prickle. "I'm a translator, Mandarin and English, mostly for corporate clients and sometimes at conferences." "Ah," he said, with what seemed like genuine interest. "You have an excellent ear for language, then." My mother was Chinese, my father American. I grew up speaking both. I wasn't sure why I was sharing personal details with this stranger, but something about his focused attention made me want to fill the silence. Marco returned with a bottle of wine that he presented to Alessandro, with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. After Alessandro nodded his approval, Marco poured a small amount for him to taste. The ritual continued with an efficiency that spoke of long practice, and soon I had a glass of deep red wine in front of me that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "To unexpected meetings," Alessandro said, raising his glass. I hesitated, then lifted mine in response. "To expensive rescues," something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes as he took a sip. I followed suit, the wine blooming across my tongue with a complexity that justified its obvious cost. "Now," Alessandro said, setting down his glass, "tell me who this man was, who thought so little of his good fortune as to stand you up." I explained about Eliza's cousin's friend, feeling increasingly foolish as I laid out the blind date setup. Alessandro listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he made a small sound that might have been dismissal. "A boy playing at being a man," he said. "You've had a fortunate escape." Before I could respond, Marco returned with menus, though Alessandro waved his away. "We'll have the chef's selection, starting with the scallops and the truffle risotto." He looked at me. "Any allergies or aversions I should know about?" I shook my head, a little unsettled by his casual command of the situation. "No allergies, but good?" He interrupted smoothly. "Marco, make sure Chef Paolo knows the lady appreciates his artistry." As Marco departed again, I found myself studying Alessandro, trying to piece together the puzzle of him. He was clearly wealthy and powerful, accustomed to deference. The security guards stationed nearby suggested importance, or danger, or both. Yet there was something else, something in the way the restaurant staff practically bowed in his presence, in the way other diners cast furtive glances our way. "You're staring, Emma," Alessandro said, without looking at me, his attention on the wine as he swirled it gently in his glass. "Sorry," I said automatically. "It's just, is this how you normally dine? With bodyguards and staff treating you like royalty?" Now he did look at me, his dark eyes assessing. "Yes," he said simply. "Does that make you uncomfortable?" It should have. Everything about this situation should have made me uncomfortable, and yet there was something almost freeing about sitting across from a man who made no apologies for his power, who wore it as naturally as his perfectly tailored suit. "I'm just trying to understand why," I said carefully. "Someone like you would bother with someone like me." Alessandro's expression shifted, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes for just a moment before disappearing. "Someone like you," he repeated, his voice dropping lower. "And what kind of person do you think you are, Emma Chen?" The question lingered between us, weighted with an intensity I couldn't quite understand. What kind of person did I think I was? Ordinary. Unremarkable. The kind of woman who gets stood up on blind dates and can't afford the wine she's already ordered. "I'm just normal," I said finally, tracing my finger around the base of my wine glass. "I work 60-hour weeks translating corporate documents that no one will ever read. I live with a roommate because rent in this city is obscene. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. I looked up at him. Nothing that would typically interest someone who dines with an entourage. Alessandro's expression remained inscrutable, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle leaning forward that made the air between us seem to compress. "Normality is vastly overrated," he said quietly, "and often merely a disguise." Before I could ask what he meant, the first course arrived. Scallops resting on beds of pureed cauliflower, garnished with caviar and gold leaf. The presentation was artistic, the portion tiny, but exquisite. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how unprepared I was for the formality of this dining experience. "Eat," Alessandro said, not touching his own plate yet. "I want to see if you enjoy it." There was something almost predatory in the way he watched me, and I felt a flutter of nervousness as I took the first bite. The scallop melted in my mouth, buttery and perfectly seared, the briny pop of caviar enhancing rather than overwhelming it. I couldn't help the small sound of pleasure that escaped me. A smile, the first genuine one I'd seen, curved Alessandro's lips. "Good," he said, finally picking up his own fork. "There's nothing more disappointing than sharing excellent food with someone who doesn't appreciate it." As we ate, he asked questions about my work, displaying a surprising knowledge of international business translation. His own responses about his business ventures remained vague, skimming the surface of real information like stones across water. What became clear was his intelligence. Sharp, quick, and calculating. He spoke 4 languages fluently, he told me, and could navigate basic conversation in 3 more. "Languages reveal how people think," he said, as our empty plates were whisked away and replaced with small bowls of truffle risotto. "The patterns, the underlying structures of thought. You must see this in your work." I nodded, warming to the topic. It's why machine translation still falls short. It can't capture the cultural context, the subtle shadings of meaning. I took a bite of the risotto, the earthy perfume of truffles filling my senses. Last month, I was working on a contract where a single character in Mandarin had 3 possible interpretations, each changing the entire meaning of the clause. "And which interpretation did you choose?" Alessandro asked, his dark eyes intent on mine. "The one that most favored my client," I admitted, then felt a flush of embarrassment at my candor. "I mean, within ethical boundaries, of course." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Of course," he echoed, but the slight curve of his mouth suggested he understood perfectly the gray areas of business negotiations. "Loyalty is important in your line of work, then." "Trust is everything," I agreed. "Clients need to know I'll protect their interests." "And do they reward this loyalty appropriately?" I thought of my tiny apartment, my dwindling bank account, the promotion I'd been promised for 6 months that never materialized. "Not always," I said carefully. Alessandro made a dismissive gesture with one hand. "Then they're fools. Loyalty should be valued above all else." The intensity in his voice suggested this wasn't merely a business philosophy, but something deeper, more personal. The conversation flowed more easily after that, carried along by excellent food and wine that seemed to appear without Alessandro ever having to request it. I found myself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation, drawn in by his focused attention. He listened when I spoke, as if my words were the only sounds in the room worth hearing. It was intoxicating in a way that had nothing to do with the wine. It wasn't until the main course, a perfectly cooked fillet with a red wine reduction, that I noticed the pattern of his questioning. For all that he seemed to be sharing, he was primarily extracting information. My routine, my apartment location, my social connections, my family background. The realization sent a chill through me that counteracted the warmth of the wine. "You ask a lot of questions," I said, setting down my fork. "But I still know almost nothing about you." Alessandro didn't seem bothered by my sudden directness. "What would you like to know? Why do you have bodyguards? And don't say it's standard for businessmen, because it isn't." He studied me for a long moment, then set down his knife and fork with deliberate precision. "In my position, there are people who might wish to negotiate from a position of leverage. My security team ensures these negotiations happen only on my terms." The careful phrasing raised more questions than it answered. "Are you in danger?" "Everyone with power is in danger, Emma. The greater the power, the greater the danger." He reached for his wine glass, the movement smooth and controlled. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. Everything about this man should have sent me running. Instead, I found myself drawn closer to the flame. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "I think it depends on what kind of power you have, and how you use it." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. A very diplomatic answer. "I'm a translator, not a diplomat. The line between the two is thinner than most realize." A movement near the restaurant entrance caught my attention. A commotion as 2 men in suits spoke urgently to the maitre d'. One of them pointed in our direction, his face flushed with either anger or exertion. Alessandro followed my gaze, his expression hardening as he recognized the men. He made a subtle gesture, and instantly his security detail was on alert, one moving toward us while the other intercepted the newcomers. I watched, pulse quickening, as a tense exchange took place by the entrance. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro's expression remained calm, but I noticed his right hand had moved beneath the table. "A minor business disagreement, nothing to concern yourself with." The men at the entrance were being firmly escorted outside now, their protests cut short by the arrival of 2 more suited men, who seemed to materialize from nowhere. I hadn't noticed them in the restaurant before, but they clearly worked for Alessandro. "Your business disagreements require physical removal?" I asked, unable to keep the tension from my voice. Alessandro's eyes returned to mine, dark and unreadable. "Some people don't understand the concept of appropriate timing." "Marco!" he called, not raising his voice, but somehow making it carry to the hovering waiter. "The check, please." Panic fluttered in my chest. "Are we leaving?" "Yes," he said, rising from the booth with fluid grace. "I apologize for the interruption to our dinner." Marco appeared with a small leather folder, which Alessandro took without looking inside, slipping what I glimpsed as several large bills within before returning it. More than the bill required, I was certain. "But," I started, not even sure what I was objecting to. "I have another establishment nearby where we can continue our evening in peace," Alessandro said, extending his hand to help me from the booth. "If you wish to join me." I hesitated, every warning bell in my mind finally clanging at full volume. I didn't know this man. The incident with the angry visitors, the security detail, the careful vagueness of his answers, all pointed to something dangerous, something I should stay far away from. "I should probably just go home," I said, though even to my own ears the statement lacked conviction. Alessandro studied me, his expression unreadable. "Of course. I'll have my driver take you." Relief mingled with an unexpected disappointment. "Thank you for dinner," I said, gathering my purse. It was memorable. He smiled slightly. "The evening doesn't have to end yet, Emma. Come with me for one more drink. Then, if you still wish to leave, my driver will take you anywhere you want to go." I should have refused. I knew I should have refused. Instead, I found myself nodding, accepting his outstretched hand as he helped me to my feet. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and that same electric current I'd felt earlier shot up my arm. We left through a private exit at the back of the restaurant, bypassing the main entrance where the disturbance had occurred. A sleek black car waited outside, engine running, a broad-shouldered man holding the door open as we approached. Alessandro guided me with a light touch at the small of my back, his hand radiating heat through the thin fabric of my dress. The car's interior was spacious and luxurious, the leather seats butter-soft beneath me. Alessandro slid in beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body, but not quite touching. The door closed with a solid thunk, and the world outside immediately seemed to recede, the tinted windows and soundproofing creating a bubble of isolation. "Where are we going?" I asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "I own a private lounge a few blocks from here," Alessandro replied, "more discreet than the restaurant." "Is discretion necessary?" The question slipped out before I could censor it. He turned to look at me, shadows playing across the planes of his face as streetlights slid past outside. "In my experience, privacy is always valuable. Wouldn't you agree?" There was a weight to his words that suggested layers of meaning. "I suppose it depends on what you need privacy for," I said carefully. His mouth curved. A diplomatic answer again. "You didn't answer my question earlier," I pressed, emboldened by the cocoon-like privacy of the car, "about what kind of business you're really in." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling he was making calculations, assessing risks and rewards. "I manage certain aspects of this city's economy that don't appear in official records," he said finally. "I facilitate relationships, resolve conflicts, and ensure that transactions proceed smoothly." The deliberately obscure phrasing only confirmed what I had begun to suspect. My pulse quickened, but whether from fear or something more complicated, I couldn't say. "You're not just a businessman," I said quietly. "Very few people are just one thing, Emma." The car slowed and turned into what appeared to be an underground parking garage. We descended a level, then another, before stopping in a reserved space near a private elevator. The driver opened Alessandro's door first, then circled to mine. Alessandro exited and waited for me, offering his hand once more. I hesitated only briefly before taking it, allowing him to help me from the car. His grip was firm, steadying me as my heel caught slightly on the concrete floor. For just a moment, I found myself pulled against his chest, my palm resting on the solid wall of muscle beneath his expensive suit. He smelled of cedar and spice and something darker, something uniquely him. "Careful," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Then he released me, though his hand remained at the small of my back as he guided me toward the elevator. The security detail had somehow arrived ahead of us, one man holding the elevator door, while scanning the garage with vigilant eyes. Inside, Alessandro pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner, causing the button for the top floor to illuminate. The doors closed silently, and we began to ascend. The elevator was mirrored on 3 sides, multiplying our reflections into infinity. I caught glimpses of us from every angle. Alessandro tall and commanding beside my more slender frame. In the harsh elevator lighting, the differences between us were even more apparent. His bespoke suit and confident posture contrasting with my off-the-rack dress and nervous stance. And yet, there was something in the way he positioned himself slightly in front of me, the way his eyes constantly moved, assessing our surroundings, that made me feel unexpectedly protected. "You're very quiet," Alessandro observed as the floor numbers climbed. "I'm trying to decide if I'm making a terrible mistake," I admitted. He turned to look at me directly, his dark eyes intent. "And what conclusion have you reached?" "I haven't yet, but I think the sensible part of my brain is losing the argument." A smile ghosted across his lips. "The sensible parts of our brains rarely lead us to the most memorable experiences, Emma." The elevator slowed smoothly, and the doors opened to reveal a stunning space. A private lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The lighting was low and intimate, the furnishings sleek and modern. A bar of gleaming mahogany dominated one wall, while comfortable seating arrangements were scattered throughout. Despite the size of the space, we appeared to be the only occupants. "Welcome to Il Rifugio," Alessandro said, his hand still at the small of my back as he guided me inside. My private sanctuary. As I stepped into the room, I could feel myself crossing a threshold that had nothing to do with the physical space. A boundary between the life I had lived until tonight, and something new and dangerous and thrillingly unknown. The view was breathtaking. From this height, the city spread out like a tapestry of lights, buildings transforming into jeweled structures against the velvet darkness. I moved toward the windows, drawn by the panorama. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "It is," Alessandro agreed, though when I glanced back, I found him watching me rather than the view. He had removed his suit jacket, draping it over a nearby chair, leaving him in a crisp white shirt that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his torso. The simple act of removing a layer felt strangely intimate. He moved to join me at the window, standing close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I come here to think," he said, "to remind myself of what I've built and what remains to be done." "And what exactly have you built?" I asked, turning to face him. Alessandro considered me for a long moment. "An empire of sorts," he finally said, though not one recognized by conventional authorities. The confirmation of what I'd suspected should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm descend, as if the uncertainty had been worse than the truth. "You're an organized crime," I said. Not a question this time. "I prefer to think of it as alternative governance." His voice remained level, his eyes never leaving mine. "The traditional structures of power in this city are corrupt and inefficient. I provide stability where they cannot." A burst of nervous laughter escaped me. "Is that what you call it?" "It's what it is." He moved to a sideboard where crystal decanters gleamed in the low light. "Would you like a drink? I have an excellent 25-year-old scotch." The surreality of the situation struck me anew. Standing in a luxurious penthouse with a self-admitted crime lord who was offering me aged scotch as if we were at a normal dinner party. "Yes," I said, surprising myself. "I think I need one." Alessandro poured amber liquid into 2 heavy crystal tumblers, then returned to hand me one. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, sending that now familiar current through my skin. I took a sip, the scotch burning a warm path down my throat. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Isn't it dangerous to admit what you are to a stranger?" He moved back to the window, gazing out at his domain. "You're intelligent enough to have already deduced the truth. Denying it would only insult us both." He turned to face me, and I find myself disinclined to lie to you. I took another sip, larger this time, welcoming the heat as it spread through my chest. "Is that unusual for you, being disinclined to lie?" A smile touched his lips, making him look momentarily younger, almost boyish. "Extraordinarily so. In my world, truth is a luxury rarely afforded. And yet you're affording it to me. Why?" Instead of answering, Alessandro gestured toward a seating area of low, comfortable couches. "Please, sit. The view is just as magnificent from there, and we can be more comfortable." I followed him, choosing a seat that allowed me to keep some distance between us. The couch was buttery soft leather, cradling my body as I sank into it. Alessandro sat opposite me, his posture relaxed yet somehow still commanding the space. "You asked why," he said, swirling the scotch in his glass. "From the moment I saw you in that restaurant, abandoned, vulnerable, yet holding yourself with such dignity, I felt something I rarely experience. Curiosity." His eyes found mine, dark and intent. "You intrigue me, Emma Chen, because I was stood up on a date?" I asked skeptically. "Because of how you handled it. Most women would have left immediately, or caused a scene, or dissolved into tears. You did none of those things. You sat there, spine straight, chin up, facing your humiliation with quiet courage." He leaned forward slightly. "Strength and vulnerability is uncommon." His words warmed me in a way that had nothing to do with the scotch. "You're giving me too much credit. I was just too broke to leave." "Perhaps that was part of it," he acknowledged with a slight incline of his head. "But not all. There's something in you that refuses to break, even when bent. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror. The comparison should have offended me. I was nothing like this dangerous man. And yet, something in his words resonated. I had survived my own battles, my mother's death when I was 16, my father's subsequent descent into alcoholism, working my way through college while supporting us both. Different wars than his, fought on different battlefields, but wars nonetheless. "You don't know me," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Not yet," he agreed, "but I would like to." The simple statement hung in the air between us, weighted with implications. I knew I should leave now, call an Uber, and forget this night had ever happened. Return to my small apartment, my struggling career, my unremarkable life, but the thought felt hollow, like settling for shadows after glimpsing the sun. "What would that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You knowing me?" Alessandro set his glass down on the table between us, the movement deliberate. "That depends entirely on what you want, Emma." "And if I don't know what I want?" His eyes darkened. "Then perhaps I can help you discover it." The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with an electricity I couldn't name but could certainly feel. I finished my scotch in one burning swallow, needing the liquid courage. "You're a dangerous man," I said. "Yes." No denial, no attempt to soften the truth, and being known by you would be dangerous for me. "Also, yes." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, regarding me intently. "But danger and reward often walk hand in hand. The question is whether you believe the potential reward justifies the risk." I set my empty glass beside his. "I don't even know what the reward might be." Something shifted in his expression, a heat entering his gaze that made my pulse quicken. "Don't you?" Before I could respond, a discreet chime sounded. Alessandro's expression hardened as he reached for his phone, checking the screen with a frown. "Excuse me," he said, rising. "I need to take this. It will only take a moment." He moved across the room, speaking in rapid Italian too quiet for me to hear. Left alone, I had a moment to breathe, to think. What was I doing here? This man had admitted to being a criminal, surrounded himself with armed guards, and radiated danger from every pore. And yet, I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. Not just physical attraction, though that was undeniably present, but something deeper. A recognition, perhaps, of something in him that matched something in me, like puzzle pieces from entirely different puzzles that somehow fit together. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out to find 3 increasingly panicked messages from Eliza. "Emma, are you okay? Did you get home safe? Emma. Answer me or I'm calling the police." I quickly typed back, "I'm fine. Got a ride. Tell you everything tomorrow." The response was immediate. "What? With who? Send your location now." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. What would I even say? Having drinks with the crime lord who rescued me from my failed date didn't seem like something that would reassure her. "Everything's fine. I promise. Battery dying. Talk tomorrow." I turned off the phone before she could respond, knowing it was cowardly, but unable to face her questions when I had no answers myself. Alessandro returned, his expression now composed, though I detected lingering tension in the set of his shoulders. "I apologize for the interruption." "Business or pleasure?" I asked. "Business," he said, resuming his seat. "Always business." "Is it difficult?" The question slipped out before I could reconsider it. "What you do?" He studied me for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Any position of leadership comes with burdens," he said finally. "People depend on me, not just my associates, but their families, businesses under my protection, communities who rely on the stability I provide." "Protection," I repeated, unable to keep a note of skepticism from my voice. "Is that what you call it?" A flicker of something, perhaps anger, perhaps respect, crossed his face. "You disapprove. I don't know enough to approve or disapprove," I said carefully. "But I know that protection often means something very different in your line of work." Alessandro leaned back, regarding me thoughtfully. "In the absence of effective legitimate authority, someone will always fill the vacuum. I prefer it be someone with principles. And you have principles?" "I do." There was steel in his voice now. "I don't deal in human trafficking. I don't sell to children. I keep violence away from civilians. I protect those loyal to me as if they were my own blood." His eyes hardened. "And I punish betrayal without mercy." A shiver ran down my spine at his last words, the implicit threat in them impossible to miss. This was a man who had ordered people killed, who lived by a code outside society's laws. "Why translation?" he asked suddenly, changing the subject. The abrupt shift threw me off balance. "What? Why did you choose to become a translator? It's demanding work with little recognition." I took a moment to gather my thoughts. My mother always said I lived between worlds. Too Chinese for America, too American for China. Translation lets me bridge those worlds, find meaning in the spaces between languages. I traced the edge of my empty glass with my fingertip, and I'm good at it. Really good. "Yet underpaid and undervalued," Alessandro observed. "The file on your company suggests they exploit your talent." My head snapped up. "File? You've been investigating me?" He didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course. I make it a point to know who I'm dealing with." "When?" I demanded. "We only met hours ago. I had my people run a preliminary background check while we were still at the restaurant," he said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "A more thorough investigation has been ongoing since we left." Anger flared in my chest. "You had no right." "I take my security very seriously," he cut in, his voice hardening. "I needed to know you weren't placed in my path deliberately." "Placed in your—" I broke off, realization dawning. "You thought I might be working for someone? A rival or the police?" Alessandro shrugged, the gesture elegant despite its casualness. It was a possibility that needed to be eliminated. "And has it been?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Am I cleared of suspicion?" His lips curved slightly. "You have no criminal record, no connections to law enforcement or rival organizations, an exemplary academic record at UCLA. A struggling translation business where you're consistently underpaid for your expertise. A father in an assisted living facility in San Diego, whose care consumes a significant portion of your income." His eyes held mine. "You are exactly who you appear to be, Emma Chen, which, as I said earlier, is fascinating to me." The detailed recitation of my life left me cold. "You had no right," I repeated. "Perhaps not," he acknowledged. "But in my position, rights are less relevant than necessities." I stood abruptly. "I want to leave now." Alessandro remained seated, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Of course. My driver will take you anywhere you wish to go." He made no move to stop me, which somehow made it harder to maintain my resolve. "You promised me a ride home if I wanted to leave after one drink," I reminded him. "I've had my drink." "So you have." He rose smoothly, "Though I hope you'll reconsider. Our evening has barely begun." "What more could there possibly be?" I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. "You've admitted to being a criminal, invaded my privacy, investigated my family, and saved you from humiliation, provided an exceptional meal, brought you to my private sanctuary, and been more honest with you than I have with anyone in years," he countered, taking a step closer. "Tell me you feel nothing, Emma. Tell me you want to return to your tiny apartment and your exploitative job and the dates with boys who don't recognize your value, and I'll have my driver take you home this instant." His proximity was intoxicating. The heat of him, the scent of him, the sheer force of his presence overwhelming my senses. I should have stepped back, maintained distance, but my body refused to obey. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you?" He raised a hand, not quite touching my face, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. "Your pulse is racing. Your pupils are dilated. Your breathing has quickened." His voice dropped lower, sending shivers across my skin. "Your body knows, even if your mind hesitates." I swallowed hard. This is insane. We just met. And yet, here we are. His fingertips finally made contact, tracing a line from my temple to my jaw with exquisite gentleness. Some connections defy conventional timelines, Emma. Sometimes recognition happens in an instant. His touch burned like a brand, making it impossible to think clearly. I knew I should pull away, knew that every moment in his presence pulled me deeper into dangerous waters. But the alternative, returning to my empty apartment, to my colorless existence, suddenly seemed unbearable. "One more hour," I heard myself say. "I'll stay 1 more hour." Something that might have been triumph flashed in Alessandro's eyes, quickly masked. 1 hour, he agreed, "though I warn you, Emma Chen, I can be very persuasive when given time." I didn't doubt it. The question was whether I wanted to be persuaded, and the answer terrified me more than anything else about this night. "More scotch?" he offered, his hand dropping from my face, leaving a ghost of sensation behind. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As he moved to refill our glasses, I returned to the window, pressing my heated forehead against the cool glass. Below us, the city continued its nocturnal dance, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this penthouse. How many other women had stood where I now stood, looking out over Alessandro Russo's domain? How many had he brought here, seduced with danger and luxury and the intoxicating force of his attention, and how many had left unscathed? Alessandro returned with our refilled glasses, joining me at the window. We stood in silence for a moment, the city lights reflecting in the dark glass like stars fallen to earth. "Tell me something true," I said suddenly, turning to face him. His eyebrow rose slightly. "I've told you many true things tonight. Something personal," I clarified. "Something that isn't about business or power." Alessandro considered this, taking a sip of his scotch. "My mother was a seamstress," he said finally. "She could look at any piece of fabric and immediately know its quality, its potential. She taught me that appearances matter, but what lies beneath the surface matters more." The image of a young Alessandro watching his mother work was unexpectedly touching. "Is she still alive?" A shadow crossed his face. "No. She died when I was 14. Breast cancer that went undetected because we couldn't afford proper medical care." "I'm sorry," I said softly. "It was a long time ago, not so long that it doesn't still hurt." His eyes met mine, something vulnerable flickering in their depths before disappearing. "No," he acknowledged. "Not so long." "My mother died too," I offered. "When I was 16, a car accident." "I know," he said, then had the grace to look apologetic when I frowned. "It was in the file. I should have been angry again at the reminder of his invasion of my privacy. But instead, I felt a strange connection. Two people who had lost their mothers too young, who had been forced to grow up too quickly. "What happened after?" I asked, genuinely curious. "After your mother died." Alessandro's expression darkened. "My father was not a strong man. He turned to alcohol, then gambling. He accumulated debts to people who don't forgive such things." He took another sip of his scotch. "When they came to collect, I offered myself instead. I was young, but I was smart and willing to learn." "They took you in? A 14-year-old boy?" The man who ran that organization had lost his own son years before. He saw something in me, potential, perhaps, or simply a reflection of what he'd lost. Alessandro's voice was distant now, as if recalling a different life. "He became my mentor, taught me everything he knew. When he died 10 years later, I took control. And built your empire," I said softly. He inclined his head slightly, from necessity at first, then from ambition. "And now? Now?" Alessandro turned to look out at the city again. "Now it's about legacy, building something that will outlast me." There was loneliness in his voice that resonated with something inside me. Despite all his power, all his wealth, Alessandro Russo stood apart from the world, separated by the very things that elevated him above others. "What about you?" he asked, his focus returning to me. "After your mother's death, what happened?" I shrugged, the memory still painful despite the years. "My father broke, not all at once, but piece by piece. He'd always been a social drinker, but after the accident it became his primary relationship. I was applying to colleges when she died. I almost didn't go, but you did. I got a scholarship to UCLA. My mother had been so proud when I was accepted. I couldn't bear to waste the opportunity." I swallowed hard, remembering those difficult years. I worked 3 jobs while taking a full course load, came home every other weekend to clean the house, pay the bills, make sure my father was still alive. Alessandro's expression was unreadable. "A heavy burden for a young woman, no heavier than yours at 14, I pointed out. "Perhaps." His voice softened. "Though my path led me to power and wealth, yours led to a tiny apartment and a job that doesn't value me." I finished with a bitter laugh. "You can say it. I'm not offended by the truth." Alessandro moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Your circumstances don't define your worth, Emma. Easy for a rich man to say." "I wasn't always rich," he reminded me. "I recognize quality when I see it, regardless of its current setting." There was something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, that made my breath catch. I took a hasty sip of my scotch, needing the burn to ground me. "Your hour is nearly up," Alessandro said, glancing at the elegant watch on his wrist. "Have you decided? Will you stay or go?" The question hung between us, weighted with possibilities. I knew the sensible answer, the safe answer, and yet... "I should go," I said, even as something inside me rebelled against the words. "Should," he repeated, moving a fraction closer. "But will you?" His proximity was intoxicating, clouding my judgment. I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of him. In his dark eyes, I saw desire, but also something else, a genuine interest that I hadn't experienced in longer than I cared to admit. "Why me?" I whispered. "Of all the women you could have, why choose someone like me?" Alessandro raised his hand to my face, this time making full contact, his palm warm against my cheek. "Because you're real," he said simply. "In a world of masks and facades, you stand naked in your truth." "I'm not special," I protested weakly. "You are to me." His thumb traced my lower lip, sending electricity racing through my veins. "Stay, Emma. Not just for tonight, but for breakfast tomorrow. Let me show you a glimpse of what your life could be." Warning bells clanged in my mind, but they seemed distant, drowned out by the thunder of my heart. "And after breakfast? What then?" "That would be up to you," he said. "I'm not offering forever, Emma. Not yet. I'm offering a door to a different world. Whether you walk through it is your choice." I knew I was standing on a precipice. One step forward and my life would change irrevocably. One step back and I would return to safety and obscurity. If I stay, I said carefully, it doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything beyond tonight and breakfast. Alessandro's lips curved into a smile that transformed his severe features, making him devastatingly handsome. Of course. And you'll still have your driver take me home tomorrow, if that's what I want. You have my word. He set his glass down on a nearby table, then gently took mine and did the same, though I hope to persuade you otherwise. His hand returned to my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with exquisite tenderness. Slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down until his lips were a breath away from mine. Last chance to run, Emma Chen, he murmured. Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure sensation that wiped away all thought. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the hard plane of his body as the kiss deepened. I felt consumed, devoured, as if he were trying to absorb me into himself. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I saw something like wonder in his eyes. Stay with me tonight, he said, his voice rough with desire. This time, there was no hesitation. Yes. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar sensation of Egyptian cotton against my bare skin. For a moment, I was disoriented, the luxurious surroundings foreign to my sleep-addled mind. Then memories of the previous night came flooding back, the abandoned date, Alessandro's unexpected rescue, this penthouse, and everything that had followed. The space beside me in the massive bed was empty, but still warm. I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest, and found Alessandro standing by the windows, already dressed in tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to expose muscular forearms. He was speaking quietly on his phone in rapid Italian, his back to me. I took the opportunity to study him unobserved. In the morning light, he looked no less dangerous than he had the night before, but there was a humanity to him that the darkness had obscured. The set of his shoulders spoke of burdens carried too long alone. The gestures of his free hand as he spoke hinted at passions kept tightly controlled. He turned suddenly, as if sensing my gaze, and his expression softened when he saw me awake. He murmured something into the phone and ended the call, slipping the device into his pocket as he approached the bed. Good morning, he said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Did you sleep well? I nodded, suddenly self-conscious despite the intimacies we had shared hours before. What time is it? Just after 9. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the casual tenderness of the gesture making my heart stutter. I've ordered breakfast. It should arrive soon. I should probably get dressed, I said, glancing around for my clothes. There's no rush. His eyes traveled over me, warm with appreciation, even though the sheet covered me. But if you'd be more comfortable, I had some clothes brought for you. They're in the bathroom. You had clothes brought for me, I repeated, unsure whether to be touched or disturbed by his presumption. How would you even know my size? A smile played around his lips. I pay attention to details, Emma. It's how I've survived this long. The implications of his statement that he had been studying me, memorizing me, sent a shiver of something between fear and excitement down my spine. I clutched the sheet tighter. I think I'll take a shower, I said, needing a moment alone to gather my thoughts. Alessandro nodded and stood. Take your time. I'll be in the living room when you're ready. He left, closing the bedroom door behind him with quiet precision. I exhaled slowly, trying to process the surreality of my situation. 24 hours ago, I had been preparing for a blind date with a man who never showed up. Now I was in the penthouse of a crime lord who had bought me clothes and ordered breakfast as if this were a normal morning after. The bathroom was as luxurious as the rest of the penthouse, all marble and glass, with a shower large enough for 4 people and a soaking tub that could have been classified as a small pool. On the counter lay several shopping bags from high-end boutiques. Inside I found underwear, jeans, a cashmere sweater, and even shoes, all in my exact size. The tags were still attached, the prices making me wince. I showered quickly, the multiple shower heads and expensive toiletries a far cry from my cramped apartment bathroom with its perpetually lukewarm water. After drying off with a towel so plush it felt like a cloud, I dressed in the new clothes, which fit perfectly. The mirror reflected back a version of me that looked both familiar and strange. My face the same, but the luxurious context transforming me into someone else. When I emerged from the bedroom, I found Alessandro in the living area, seated at a table by the windows already laid with a breakfast spread that would have fed 4 people. He rose when he saw me, his eyes appreciative as they took in my appearance. "Beautiful," he said simply. I flushed, unused to such direct compliments. "Thank you for the clothes. They fit perfectly. I'm glad." He pulled out a chair for me. "Please, eat." I sat, overwhelmed by the array of food before me. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, and a carafe of what smelled like freshly squeezed orange juice. "This is a lot," I said. "I wasn't sure what you preferred." Alessandro took the seat across from me. So I ordered a selection. I reached for the orange juice, pouring myself a glass. "Do you always do this? The grand gestures, the excess?" He raised an eyebrow. "Is that what this is to you? Excess?" "Isn't it?" I gestured at the spread. "One person doesn't need all this food." "Need and want are different things, Emma." He selected a pastry for himself. "I've lived with nothing. I prefer abundance." I thought of my careful budgeting, the way I stretched each dollar until it screamed. Most people don't have that choice. "But you could." His gaze was intent. "That's what I'm offering you." I set down my glass carefully. "What exactly are you offering me, Alessandro? Because if it's to be your mistress, or whatever the current term is—" "I'm offering you opportunity," he interrupted, his voice firm. "A chance to use your talents where they'll be properly valued and compensated." I stared at him. "You want to hire me?" In a manner of speaking. He leaned forward. "My organization deals internationally. We need someone with your linguistic skills and cultural knowledge for certain negotiations and translations. Someone discreet, intelligent, and unaffiliated with any existing faction." "You want me to work for your criminal empire?" I said flatly. Alessandro's expression remained impassive. "I want you to work for me in a professional capacity that would utilize your considerable talents. The nature of my business is irrelevant." "It's not irrelevant if what you're asking me to do is illegal." Translation itself is not illegal, regardless of what is being translated. He took a sip of his coffee. "But I understand your hesitation. That's why I'm offering a trial arrangement. 3 months. Triple what you're making now, plus bonuses for particularly sensitive projects. At the end of that time, if you're uncomfortable, we part ways professionally with no consequences." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. Triple my current salary would solve so many problems, would make my father's care more manageable, would give me breathing room for the first time in years. "And what about—" I gestured vaguely between us. "This? Last night?" Alessandro's expression softened. "That is separate, Emma. I won't deny my attraction to you, or my desire to continue what we've begun, but your professional decision and your personal decision regarding me are distinct. You can accept the job and reject me, if that's your choice. And you'd be fine with that?" I asked skeptically. "I didn't say I'd be fine with it," he said with a faint smile. "I said it was your choice. I'm a patient man when the prize is worth waiting for." The way he looked at me, as if I were precious and desirable, made it hard to think clearly. I reached for a piece of fruit, needing something to do with my hands. "I'd need to think about it," I said. "Both offers." "Of course." He nodded, seemingly pleased. "Take all the time you need. Though I hope you won't need much. I believe we could be remarkable together, in all respects." I ate a few bites in silence, trying to sort through the tangle of my thoughts. The rational part of me knew I should decline both offers, return to my normal life, and pretend this extraordinary interlude had never happened. But another part, a part I hadn't known existed until Alessandro awakened it, craved the danger, the luxury, the intoxicating sense of possibility he represented. "What would I be translating?" I asked finally. "I need to know what I'd be involved in." "Primarily business contracts and negotiation terms," he said. "Some correspondence with international partners. Occasionally you'd serve as a live translator for meetings. Not drug deals or assassination orders. Alessandro actually laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm. No, Emma. Whatever you may think of me, I don't conduct my business like a cartoon villain. I felt my cheeks warm. I don't know how your business works. That's the point. Fair enough. His expression grew serious. My organization deals in many things. Import, export, real estate, private lending, protection services, entertainment venues, and yes, some activities that fall outside legal parameters. But I maintain certain standards. I told you my principles last night, and I meant them. I studied him, trying to reconcile the complex man before me with the simplistic notions of criminality I'd grown up with. And if I see something that crosses a line for me, you walk away, he said simply. With a severance package and my word that you'll be left alone. It sounded too good to be true, which usually meant it was. Why me? There must be professional translators who already work in your world. Alessandro's gaze was steady. Because you're untainted by existing loyalties. Because your skills are exceptional. And yes, because I want you close to me. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I desire you, Emma, but I also respect you. The two aren't mutually exclusive. His touch sent warmth spiraling through me, making it difficult to maintain my composure. I withdrew my hand, needing distance to think clearly. If I say yes to the job but no to the personal aspect, would I still see you? I would be your employer, he said. We would interact professionally. I wouldn't force my attentions where they weren't wanted. I nodded, absorbing this. And if I say yes to both, something darkened in his gaze, a heat that made my breath catch. Then we explore this connection between us and see where it leads. No promises beyond mutual honesty and respect. And exclusivity? I heard myself ask, surprising both of us. Alessandro's lips curved. Absolutely. I don't share what's mine, Emma. The possessive note in his voice should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a thrill through my body that I couldn't deny. I'm not yours yet, I reminded him. Yet, he repeated, satisfaction evident in his tone. Does that mean you're considering it? I took a deep breath. I'm considering everything. Alessandro's phone chimed with a message. He glanced at it, his expression shifting subtly before he returned his attention to me. I apologize, but I have some business that requires my attention this morning, he said, setting the phone aside. My driver can take you home whenever you're ready. The reminder of the world beyond this penthouse, my tiny apartment, my demanding job, my ordinary life, felt like a splash of cold water. Of course, I said, pushing away my half-eaten breakfast. I should get going anyway. Alessandro studied me for a moment. You're disappointed. No, I began, then stopped myself. Yes, actually. I thought we'd have more time to talk. His expression softened. I'd like nothing more than to spend the day with you, Emma. Unfortunately, some matters can't be postponed. He hesitated, then added, unless you'd be willing to wait. I should be finished by early afternoon. The invitation hung between us, tempting and dangerous. Part of me wanted to say yes, to extend this fantasy for a few more hours. But the rational part knew I needed space to think clearly, away from Alessandro's magnetic presence. I think I should go, I said finally. I have a lot to consider. He nodded, accepting my decision without argument. Of course. But before you leave, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small card, sliding it across the table to me. It was plain white with only a phone number printed in elegant black script. This is my private line. When you've made your decision about either offer, call me. I picked up the card, the heavy cardstock expensive against my fingertips. How long do I have to decide? I would appreciate an answer within a week. His dark eyes held mine, but Emma, understand this. Regardless of what you decide professionally, I want to see you again. That door remains open regardless. The intensity of his gaze made my heart race. I slipped the card into the pocket of my new jeans, nodding wordlessly. Alessandro rose from his chair with fluid grace. I'll have Carlo bring the car around. Is there anything you need before you go? I thought of my dress from last night. probably still somewhere in the bedroom. "My clothes will be cleaned and returned to you," he finished. "And your purse is on the console table by the door." Of course he had thought of everything. I stood, suddenly awkward in the face of our imminent parting. What was the proper etiquette for saying goodbye to a crime lord after a one-night stand that might become something more? Alessandro solved the dilemma by stepping closer, his hand rising to cup my cheek. "I've enjoyed our time together, Emma," he said softly. More than I expected. Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me, not the passionate embrace of the night before, but something gentler, a promise rather than a demand. It still left me breathless. When he pulled away, his expression was carefully controlled, but I caught a glimpse of genuine emotion in his eyes before he masked it. "Carlo will escort you down. I have to make a call before I leave." With that, he was gone, striding toward what I assumed was his office. I stood for a moment, fingers pressed to my lips, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. A discreet cough drew my attention to the elevator, where a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, Carlo, presumably, waited patiently. I grabbed my purse from the console table and followed him into the elevator, still feeling slightly dazed. The ride down was silent, Carlo's stoic presence beside me a reminder of the world Alessandro inhabited, a world of guards and guns and unspoken dangers. When we reached the garage level, a sleek black car waited, engine running. Carlo opened the rear door for me with formal courtesy. "Where to, Ms. Chen?" the driver asked as Carlo closed the door behind me. I gave him my address, then sat back against the leather seats, closing my eyes as the car pulled smoothly out of the garage. The real world awaited, my roommate with her inevitable questions, my job with its grinding demands, my father with his mounting medical bills. Everything exactly as it had been yesterday morning, except I wasn't the same. In the space of one night, Alessandro Russo had shown me a different life, a different version of myself. The question was whether I could, or should, reach for it. My apartment building looked shabbier than ever as the black car pulled to the curb. I thanked the driver, who responded with professional courtesy, waiting until I entered the building before driving away. The elevator was out of service again, so I trudged up 4 flights of stairs, the new designer jeans and cashmere sweater Alessandro had given me incongruous against the peeling paint and scuffed steps. I paused outside my door, bracing myself for Eliza's interrogation. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Emma!" Eliza shrieked, launching herself off the couch. "Where the hell have you been? I was about to file a missing person report." She stopped abruptly, taking in my appearance, the expensive new clothes, my slightly rumpled hair, the lingering glow that I couldn't quite suppress. "Holy shit," she breathed. "What happened to you? And what are you wearing?" I set my purse down on our small kitchen counter, buying time. "It's a long story. I've got all day," Eliza said, crossing her arms. "Start talking. Where did you go after being stood up? Why didn't you answer my texts? And since when do you own a sweater that probably costs more than our rent?" I sank onto our worn couch, the contrast between Alessandro's penthouse and our tiny apartment hitting me anew. "I met someone at the restaurant," I said slowly. "After Jason didn't show up." Eliza's eyes widened as she sat beside me. "Like, a random guy?" "Not exactly random. He was watching me get stood up, I think. He invited me to join him for dinner, and you went?" Eliza's voice rose in disbelief. "With a complete stranger? After all those lectures you've given me about safety?" I winced, acknowledging the hypocrisy. I know, but I couldn't afford the wine I'd already ordered. And he seemed... I don't know. There was something about him." Eliza leaned forward eagerly. "Something like what? Was he hot?" "Not conventionally," I said, thinking of Alessandro's severe features, "but intensely attractive, yes. Powerful. The kind of man who fills a room just by existing in it." "And you spent the night with him," Eliza said. Not a question. Her eyes dropped to my new clothes. "And he bought you stuff." I nodded, heat rising to my cheeks. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." Emma Chen, spontaneous sex goddess. Who knew? Eliza grinned, then sobered. But seriously, are you okay? This isn't like you. I'm fine, I assured her. Better than fine, actually. I trailed off, unsure how to describe Alessandro without revealing too much. That good, huh? Eliza waggled her eyebrows. So when are you seeing him again? The question brought me back to reality with a thud. I don't know if I am. He's complicated. Complicated how? Is he married? Eliza's eyes narrowed suspiciously. No, nothing like that. I hesitated, then settled for a partial truth. He's very wealthy, very powerful. Lives in a different world than we do. So? Cinderella ended up with the prince. I laughed despite myself. This is hardly a fairy tale, Liz. He's not exactly Prince Charming. More like Beast from Beauty and the Beast? Rough around the edges, but with a heart of gold? If only it were that simple. Alessandro's heart wasn't gold. It was steel, hardened by a life I could barely imagine. And yet, he had shown me tenderness, respect, a connection I hadn't expected. Something like that, I said, unwilling to explain further. Anyway, he made me an offer. Eliza's eyebrows shot up. What kind of offer? A job, I said, watching her expression shift from scandalized to curious, using my translation skills for his company. Triple my current salary. Triple? Eliza whistled low. Holy crap, Emma, that would solve so many problems for you. What kind of company is it? I chose my words carefully. International business. Import-export. Real estate. That sort of thing. Sounds fancy, Eliza said. Are you going to take it? I don't know, I admitted. It's complicated. Eliza studied me, her usual bubbliness giving way to rare seriousness. There's something you're not telling me about this guy, isn't there? I met her gaze, then looked away. Yes. Is he dangerous? The question hung in the air between us. Was Alessandro dangerous? Unquestionably. But was he dangerous to me? That was harder to answer. He operates outside normal rules, I said finally. But he has his own code. His own principles. Eliza's eyes widened. Oh my God. He's like a mob boss or something, isn't he? I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Eliza fell back against the couch cushions, her expression stunned. Emma, what the hell? You spent the night with an actual criminal? After knowing him for what, 5 hours? Have you lost your mind? Her words stung, precisely because they echoed my own doubts. Maybe, I admitted. But Liz, there's something between us that I can't explain. A connection that doesn't make sense but feels more real than anything I've experienced before. That's called danger banging, Eliza said bluntly. The thrill of someone forbidden. It's not a basis for a relationship. It's more than that, I insisted. He sees me, Liz. Really sees me. Not just what I can do for him or how I look in a dress, but who I am underneath it all. I hugged myself, the cashmere soft against my arms. Do you know how rare that is? Eliza's expression softened. I know you've been lonely, Em, and I know how hard you've worked with so little appreciation, but this guy sounds dangerous in ways that go beyond exciting bad boy territory. She wasn't wrong. Alessandro Russo didn't just break rules. He existed in a world where different rules applied. Rules written in blood and enforced with violence. I thought of his words the night before. I punish betrayal without mercy. The job would solve so many problems, I said quietly. Dad's care facility keeps raising their rates. My student loans are barely getting smaller despite my payments, and I'm so tired of being undervalued at work. So take the job, Eliza said. But be careful about the man. Professional doesn't have to mean personal. Alessandro had said as much himself, that I could accept one offer without the other, but could I really separate the two? The memory of his touch, his kiss, the way he had looked at me across the breakfast table, made me doubt it. I have a week to decide, I said. Eliza squeezed my hand. Use it. Think carefully. And maybe run a background check on this guy. I laughed humorlessly. He already ran one on me. Of course he did, Eliza muttered. Because that's not creepy at all. I stood, suddenly exhausted despite the full night's sleep. I need a shower and some time to think. Sure, Eliza said, concern still evident in her eyes. But Emma, whatever you decide, be careful. Men like that don't play by the same rules as the rest of us, I nodded, knowing she was right, yet unable to banish the memory of Alessandro's dark eyes, the feel of his hands on my skin, the sense of possibility he had awakened in me. 3 days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal. I returned to work, endured my boss taking credit for my translation of a complicated merger agreement, ate lunch at my desk, and tried to pretend that my encounter with Alessandro had been nothing more than a vivid dream, but the card with his number burned in my wallet. The cashmere sweater hung in my closet like evidence of another life. And at night, I dreamed of dark eyes and strong hands, and a voice that promised danger and desire in equal measure. On the 4th day, everything changed. I was in the middle of a tedious translation when my phone rang, an unknown number. My heart leapt, thinking it might be Alessandro, but the voice that greeted me was my father's care facility. "Ms. Chen, this is Meadowbrook Assisted Living. I'm afraid there's been an incident with your father." 20 minutes later, I was in a cab heading for the facility, heart pounding with fear. The administrator met me in the lobby, her expression grave. "Your father had a fall," she explained. He was agitated, trying to leave the building. When the staff attempted to redirect him, he became combative and fell, hitting his head. "Is he okay?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "He's stable, but the doctor wants him transferred to a memory care unit. His dementia is progressing more rapidly than we anticipated, and our facility isn't equipped for that level of care." My stomach dropped. Memory care? But that's significantly more expensive, yes, she confirmed. "I've prepared some information on facilities that might be suitable, but I must warn you, there's often a long waiting list unless you can pay privately." She handed me a folder with brochures, each one listing monthly rates that made my head spin. Even the most affordable would cost nearly twice what I was already paying, an amount that already stretched my budget to breaking point. "How long can he stay here?" I asked. 30 days, she said, not unkindly. "After that, we simply can't provide the level of care he needs." I nodded numbly, taking the folder. "Can I see him?" "Of course. He's been sedated, so he may be drowsy." My father looked smaller in the hospital bed, a bandage covering one side of his forehead. The strong, vibrant man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me while I cried after my mother's funeral, was disappearing piece by piece, replaced by a confused stranger who sometimes didn't even recognize me. I sat beside him, holding his hand, as the reality of my situation crystallized with painful clarity. I couldn't afford the care he needed. Not on my current salary, not with my existing debts, not without help. The choice that had seemed so complicated suddenly simplified. I knew what I had to do. That evening, I stood in my tiny bathroom, staring at my reflection as I prepared for what came next. I'd spent an hour on my appearance, curling my long dark hair, applying makeup with more care than usual, selecting my one good dress, a deep red that set off my olive complexion. I looked different somehow, more confident, more determined. "Going somewhere fancy?" Eliza asked when I emerged. "I'm meeting Alessandro," I said, reaching for my coat. "I've made my decision." Eliza's expression grew serious. "About the job?" "About everything." She caught my arm as I turned to leave. "Emma, are you sure about this? There are other ways to get money. Other jobs." "Not fast enough," I said. "Dad needs care now, not after I spend months job hunting. I'm worried about you," Eliza admitted. I hugged her briefly. "I know. But I'm going into this with eyes open. I know who he is, what he does, and I know what I'm risking. Just be careful," she said, "and call me if you need anything, anytime." I nodded, then left, the white card with Alessandro's number clutched in my hand. The restaurant where we agreed to meet was different from Costello. Smaller, more intimate, tucked away on a side street in the Italian district. When I arrived, the hostess led me directly to a corner table where Alessandro waited, rising as I approached. His eyes moved over me appreciatively, taking in the red dress, the careful makeup, the subtle jewelry I'd chosen. "Emma," he said, my name almost a caress on his lips. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I said, allowing him to hold my chair. He was immaculate as always in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, a a platinum tie clip the only adornment besides his signature ring. After ordering drinks, scotch for him, red wine for me, Alessandro studied me across the table, his dark eyes intent. "You've made your decision," he said, not a question. I nodded. "Yes." "And?" I took a breath, crossing my Rubicon with full awareness of what it meant. "I accept both offers, the job and the personal relationship, but I have conditions." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "You're negotiating with me?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My father needs specialized care. Memory care. It's expensive. Beyond what even your generous salary offer would cover while maintaining my own living expenses." Alessandro nodded slowly. "I see. And your condition? I want you to arrange for him to receive the best care available, not just adequate, the best, as part of my compensation package." He considered this, taking a sip of his scotch. "That's easily arranged. What else?" "I maintain my own apartment, at least for now. I need space that's mine alone." "Agreed, though I hope you'll spend significant time at my residence as well." "I will," I promised, warmth blooming in my chest at the thought. "And finally, if I ever see something in your business that crosses my ethical lines, I can walk away. From the job, not necessarily from you, without consequences." Alessandro set down his glass, his expression serious. "You have my word on all counts. Your father will receive the finest care available. Your apartment remains yours, and you retain the freedom to define your own boundaries." He leaned forward. "Is there anything else?" I shook my head. "No, those are my terms." "Then we have an agreement." He extended his hand across the table, and I took it, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "Welcome to my world, Emma Chen." Something in his tone made me shiver, a sense of irrevocability, of crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. But as his thumb caressed my palm, I knew with sudden clarity that I didn't want to return. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever complications arose, the path forward with Alessandro was the one I wanted. "When do I start?" I asked. "Tomorrow, if you'd like. I have several contracts that require immediate attention." His eyes held mine, heat building in their dark depths. "But tonight belongs to us alone." My pulse quickened at the promise in his words. "And after tonight? What happens then?" Alessandro raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent electricity racing up my arm. "We build something together, Emma, something neither of us could create alone." "A partnership," I suggested. "Yes," he agreed, his expression softening in a way I suspected few people ever witnessed. Though perhaps in time it might become something more. The possibility hung between us, tantalizing and fragile. I knew the risks I was taking, the dangers inherent in Alessandro's world, but I also knew that some chances were worth taking, some connections too powerful to deny. "I'd like that," I said softly. Alessandro smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features, making him devastatingly handsome. "As would I, Emma. More than you know." As he signaled for the waiter to bring menus, his hand still holding mine, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The path ahead wouldn't be easy or safe, but it would be extraordinary, and after a lifetime of careful choices and quiet struggles, extraordinary was exactly what I wanted. With Alessandro Russo, I would finally step out of the shadows and into a life filled with danger, passion, power, and perhaps someday love. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it at his side. Alessandro insisted on having his driver take us from the restaurant, though our destination remained unspoken between us. As we slid into the back seat of his luxury car, the privacy partition raised with silent efficiency, I felt a curious mixture of certainty and anticipation. I had made my choice. Now I would live with the consequences. "Are you having second thoughts?" Alessandro asked, his voice low in the dimness of the car. I turned to look at him, his profile strong against the passing city lights. "No," I said truthfully. "Just processing everything." His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with gentle pressure. "It's a significant change. I would be concerned if you weren't contemplating the implications." The car wound through the city toward Alessandro's building, the same penthouse where I'd spent that first night. As we ascended in the private elevator, his hand at the small of my back, I realized that this time was different. I wasn't stepping into the unknown anymore. I was walking deliberately into a new life, eyes wide open. The night that followed was both familiar and new, Alessandro's touch both possessive and reverent, as if I were something precious he'd found unexpectedly. Afterward, lying in his vast bed with the city lights glimmering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt a strange peace descend. "Tell me what you're thinking," Alessandro murmured, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my bare shoulder. "That I should be afraid," I said. "But I'm not." He propped himself up on one elbow, studying my face in the half-light. "Fear is useful only when it sharpens your awareness, not when it paralyzes you." His hand moved to cup my cheek. "You've chosen to swim in deeper waters, Emma. I'll do everything in my power to ensure you don't drown." I turned my face to press a kiss into his palm. "I've always been a strong swimmer." His smile was warm, private, an expression I suspected few people ever witnessed. "That's why you're here." The next morning marked the beginning of my new reality. After breakfast, Alessandro led me to a section of the penthouse I hadn't seen before, a home office with 2 desks, one clearly his with multiple monitors and a view of the city, the other smaller but elegant, positioned to face the door. "Your workspace," he said, "when you're here. You'll also have an office at the main building downtown." The desk held a high-end laptop, still sealed in its box, and several file folders stamped with various international shipping logos. "These need immediate attention," Alessandro explained, indicating the folders. "Contracts between our Hong Kong interests and a new partner in Shanghai. The translation needs to be perfect. There can be no misunderstandings." I picked up the top folder, flipping it open to scan the contents. Complex business language, import regulations, financial terms. Challenging but well within my capabilities. "I'll start right away," I said. Alessandro nodded, pleased. "My personal assistant will bring you anything you need. I have meetings until late afternoon, but we can discuss your work over dinner." Just like that, I was absorbed into his world. The transition was both easier and more complex than I had anticipated. The translation work itself was straightforward, if more sensitive than my previous jobs. What proved more challenging was navigating the dual nature of our relationship. Professional during working hours, personal during our private time. By the end of the first week, I had established a rhythm. Mornings at Alessandro's penthouse, working on urgent documents while he attended to his various businesses. Afternoons at the downtown office, a sleek, modern building where I had a corner office with views of the park, and a staff that treated me with a deference that took some getting used to. Evenings back at the penthouse, or occasionally at my own apartment when I needed space to breathe. The work was intellectually stimulating in a way my previous job had never been. I wasn't just translating dry corporate documents. I was facilitating complex international negotiations, sometimes sitting in on video calls to provide real-time translation while Alessandro and his associates hammered out details with foreign partners. I learned quickly to read between the lines, to understand the subtext beneath the formal business language. Some deals were entirely legitimate. Real estate acquisitions, import-export arrangements for luxury goods, investments in restaurants and clubs. Others operated in grayer areas, with careful phrasing to obscure the true nature of the transactions. True to his word, Alessandro never asked me to translate anything related to violence or the darker aspects of his business empire. Whether he was shielding me or simply compartmentalizing, I couldn't be sure, but I appreciated the boundaries nonetheless. 1 month into our arrangement, Alessandro took me to see my father at his new care facility. A luxury establishment with manicured grounds, world-class doctors, and a staff-to-patient ratio that ensured constant attention. The difference from his previous placement was stark. My father had a spacious private room overlooking gardens, access to innovative therapies, and caregivers who treated him with genuine warmth. "Do you approve?" Alessandro asked as we walked the grounds after our visit. "It's amazing," I admitted, blinking back tears. I could never have afforded this for him. Alessandro's hand tightened around mine. "Your father deserves the best care available. And you deserve the peace of knowing he's well looked after." I looked up at him. This complicated man who could order violence without hesitation, yet show such unexpected kindness. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded once, accepting my gratitude without diminishing it. "Your loyalty to your father speaks well of you, Emma. Family matters. Blood matters." I was beginning to understand that for Alessandro, these weren't just words but fundamental principles that guided his actions. Loyalty, family, honor, the old-world values that underpinned his modern criminal empire. 3 months passed, and the trial period Alessandro had initially proposed came and went without discussion. By then, I had become an integral part of his organization, trusted with increasingly sensitive negotiations. My linguistic skills had expanded beyond Mandarin and English to include basic Italian, a necessity for understanding the rapid conversations that sometimes erupted among Alessandro and his inner circle. I still maintained my apartment, though I spent less and less time there. Most of my clothes had migrated to Alessandro's penthouse, taking up space in his massive walk-in closet. The designer items he bought for me now far outnumbered my original wardrobe: cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, tailored suits for business meetings, and evening wear for the social events we occasionally attended. The social aspects of Alessandro's world presented their own challenges. At public functions, gallery openings, charity galas, restaurant launches, we presented as a successful businessman and his partner. In more private settings, among those who knew Alessandro's true nature, I was introduced simply as mine, a possessive designation that should have offended my independent spirit, but instead made me feel strangely protected. I observed the complex hierarchies of his organization, the way his captains deferred to him while commanding their own respect, the careful dance of power and submission that kept the empire functioning. Women were rare in this world, and those who were present typically fell into defined roles: wives, girlfriends, daughters to be protected. I occupied a unique position as both Alessandro's partner and a valued professional asset, earning a respect that was cautious at first, but gradually solidified as my contributions proved their worth. Not everyone approved of my presence, of course. Antonio, Alessandro's consigliere and oldest friend, regarded me with thinly veiled suspicion for months, convinced I was either an undercover agent or an opportunist. It was only after I caught a subtle mistranslation in a Hong Kong contract that would have cost them millions that he began to thaw. "You have good eyes," he told me grudgingly after that incident. "And a quick mind." From Antonio, this qualified as effusive praise. 6 months into my new life, the boundaries between Alessandro's world and mine had blurred beyond recognition. The woman who had once been stood up at Castello, who had worried about affording a glass of wine, seemed like a character from someone else's story. In her place was a woman who moved confidently through luxury and danger, who had learned to read a room for threats as well as opportunities, who understood power in all its forms. The changes weren't just external. Something within me had shifted, hardened in some places, softened in others. I was still myself, still Emma Chen, but with edges more clearly defined. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were arguments, fierce ones when Alessandro's controlling tendencies collided with my independence. There were moments of doubt, usually late at night, when I lay awake beside his sleeping form, wondering if I had compromised too much of myself in this bargain. And there were glimpses of the violence that underpinned his world, a bruised knuckle he wouldn't explain, hushed conversations that ceased when I entered a room, the occasional presence of weapons I pretended not to notice. But there was also connection, deeper than I had ever experienced. Alessandro saw me, truly saw me, in ways no one else ever had. He valued my mind as much as my body, challenged me intellectually, supported my growth both professionally and personally. And in quiet moments, when the mask of the powerful capo slipped, I glimpsed the vulnerable boy who had lost his mother too young, who had built an empire partially to ensure he would never be powerless again. On the anniversary of our first meeting, Alessandro took me back to Castello, reserving the same corner booth where he had sat that fateful night. I wore red again, a designer dress that complemented the ruby pendant he had given me that morning. a stunning piece set in platinum that nestled in the hollow of my throat. 1 year, he said, raising his glass in a toast. A significant milestone. I smiled, touching my glass to his. Did you expect we would make it this far? I had hopes, he admitted, though you've exceeded every expectation. After dinner, instead of returning to the penthouse, Alessandro directed his driver to the waterfront, where the city lights reflected on the dark water. He led me to a private dock where a sleek yacht waited, crew standing at attention as we boarded. What's this? I asked, as he guided me to the upper deck. The city skyline spread before us. I thought we could use a change of scenery, he said, his hand warm against my back. A weekend away. On the deck, a small table had been set with champagne on ice and a single red box. My pulse quickened as Alessandro gestured for me to open it. Inside wasn't what I had half expected. No ring, no formal proposal. Instead, a heavy key of antique design rested on black velvet. What does it open? I asked, lifting it carefully. Alessandro's expression was solemn, more vulnerable than I usually saw him. My home in Lake Como. The villa has been in my family for generations. He paused, watching my reaction. I wanted to be our sanctuary, away from business, away from obligations, just us. I understood the significance of the gesture. Alessandro didn't just own properties. He owned fortresses, safe houses, strategic assets. The Lake Como villa was different. It was personal, a family legacy, part of his history. Alessandro, I began, emotion tightening my throat. I'm not asking for forever, not yet, he said, his voice low and intense. But I am asking for more than what we have now. I want you in my life completely, Emma. Not just in my bed or my business, but in my future. I closed my fingers around the key, feeling its weight, the weight of history, of choice, of commitment. 1 year ago, I had stood at a precipice, staring into the unknown. Now I stood at another, but this time I could see farther into the distance, could glimpse the shape of what might be. Yes, I said simply, meeting his gaze. I want that too. Alessandro pulled me to him, his kiss fierce and possessive, yet tender in a way that still surprised me. When we broke apart, his dark eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. You've changed me, Emma Chen, he said softly. I didn't expect that. I smiled, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. We've changed each other. As the yacht pulled away from the dock, the city receding behind us, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. The path I had chosen a year ago had not been easy or safe, but it had led me here, to strength I hadn't known I possessed, to love I hadn't dared to imagine, to a life that spanned 2 worlds. Alessandro's arm circled my waist as we stood at the rail, watching the horizon open before us. Whatever came next, and in his world, the future was never certain, we would face it together, stronger for the bond between us. In the space between vulnerability and power, between danger and desire, we had found something rare and precious. A love forged in fire, tempered by choice, and all the more valuable for the risks we had taken to claim it.